The black marble windowsill chilled my fingers as I watched the autumn wind blow the last leaves off the maple tree by my terrace. This maple tree is the only thing left of my old life. I insisted that the architect preserve it when the building was planned 10 years ago. It was under this tree that Brendan proposed to me almost 40 years ago. Now it's just a tree and a memory. The last rays of the sunset illuminated the spacious living room with its high ceiling. This house is my achievement, my fortress, which I built on my own after Brendan's death. When his heart stopped that night, I felt like my life was over too. 57 is not an age when you expect to start over. I ran my fingers over the surface of the silver-framed photo, the only one I kept in the living room. In it, Brendan and I are standing by the same maple tree, both young and full of hope. Behind us is the old building we called home back then. It's amazing how much things have changed. A modest position in a real estate appraisal company has turned into a management position. Brendan's skillful investments have multiplied. And now, instead of a small house on the outskirts of Fayetteville, I owned a villa in the most prestigious neighborhood in the city. My phone suddenly came to life. The name Tamsin appeared on the screen. I hesitated for a moment. Calls from my daughter rarely brought good news, but a mother's heart always wins. "Yes, dear," I answered, ready to hear another story about the problems. "Mom, we need your help." Tamsin's voice sounded tense. "We have a burst pipe in our apartment. Everything is flooded. The repairmen say that we need to overhaul the water supply, and it will take several weeks." I felt a familiar weight in my chest. Here it is, again. Every conversation we had started with a crisis that I had to solve. "So, what do you propose?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "Can Leland and I stay at your place until the repairs are done? You have so much space." I sighed, looking at my reflection in the window. Gray hair, wrinkles around my eyes, the face of a woman who had learned to enjoy being alone after years of marriage. "Okay," I agreed. "When do you plan to arrive?" "We're already packing," Tamsin answered too quickly. The phone went dead and I was left alone with my thoughts. Something about this conversation struck me as strange, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I looked around my perfectly organized house. My fortress of solitude would soon be filled with voices. Not for long, I convinced myself. Just for a few weeks. The rapid change of plans required action. I quickly removed my personal belongings from the guest room, which was rarely used. I replaced the bedding and took extra towels out of the closet. There were not many things, but the time passed unnoticed. The doorbell rang exactly 58 minutes after our conversation. I opened the door and froze. A huge SUV was parked in the driveway, and Tamsin and her husband Leland were trying to pull what looked like a wardrobe out of the trunk. "Mom, help!" Tamsin called out when she saw me. I came closer and noticed that the whole car was filled with things. Boxes, bags, furniture. It looked like a complete relocation, not a temporary stay. "What is all this?" I asked, trying to hide my surprise. "You're only here for a few weeks, right?" Tamsin rolled her eyes, a gesture she had practiced since she was a teenager. "Mom, we can't live without our stuff, and I only took the essentials." Leland finally finished with the closet and came over to me. He was tall, with impeccable hair, and that confident smile that always made me feel uneasy. "Thank you for your hospitality, Maeve," he said, lightly touching my cheek in a mock kiss. I had to stop myself from wiping my cheek. Something about his tone always made me feel uncomfortable, like he was doing me a huge favor just by talking to me. "Bring your things in," I said, stepping aside. "I've prepared the blue room on the second floor for you." "Oh, but there's not enough room for both of us," Tamsin said quickly. "Perhaps we could take the east wing, which has 2 bedrooms and an office. The east wing is my personal area, including my bedroom and office." I opened my mouth to object, but then something unexpected happened. Another car pulled into the driveway, an old ivory sedan that I had only seen a few times when I visited Tamsin for family gatherings. 3 people got out of the car, an elderly woman with bright red dyed hair, a tall, thin man, and a young girl with blue hair. "Who are they?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "Oh, they're Leland's parents and sister," Tamsin said casually. "They're also temporarily homeless because of this terrible water supply. Our house and theirs are connected by the same system." What? I couldn't hide my shock. But you didn't say anything about them on the phone, did I? Tamsin made an innocent face. I must have forgotten. You don't mind, do you? It won't take long. Before I could answer, Leland was already greeting the newcomers and directing them to the house. Willow Farrow, a woman with red hair, introduced herself, shaking my hand with her dry fingers. We are so grateful for your help. Don't worry, I'll help in the kitchen. Harrison, the man nodded briefly, carrying two large suitcases. And I'm Bryn, the girl with blue hair winked. Do you have Wi-Fi? I stood there frozen, watching 5 strangers fill my house. 5? Yes, even Tamsin seemed like a stranger among them, part of another family to which I did not belong. The next few hours were spent in the chaos of unpacking and arguing over room assignments. Despite my protests, Tamsin and Leland ended up taking my east wing, leaving me with the blue room I had prepared for them. Leland's parents were in the guest house by the pool, and Bryn took over the meditation room on the first floor, which used to be my storage. This will be perfect for my projects, she said, arranging strange wire and plastic sculptures. When the sun went down, I was exhausted, but I still tried to maintain my hospitality. I decided to make dinner for everyone, a simple but satisfying lasagna based on Brendan's recipe. As I cooked, Willow hovered around, commenting on everything from my knives, dull, aren't they, to the way I cut the vegetables. Oh, interesting. I usually make thinner slices. You could update this kitchen, she said, opening and closing my cabinets. These fronts look dated. And where's your coffee machine? Harrison is not a man in the morning without espresso. I continued to cook in silence. It will pass, I kept telling myself. Just a few weeks. At dinner, the atmosphere became even stranger. Harrison complained about the lack of cable TV in the guest house. Bryn wondered aloud if she should repaint the walls in her new room a more creative color. And Leland asked about my work schedule. You work full-time, right? So the house will be empty? He asked as he piled on a second helping of lasagna. Yes, I leave at 8 and come back around 6, I answered, feeling a little anxious about his question. Great, he exclaimed. Then I can use the living room as a studio for filming. The light is just perfect. But, I started, but Tamsin interrupted me. Mom, you want to help Leland with his career, right? He got an order from a magazine. This could be his breakthrough. I looked at my daughter, trying to find in her eyes the little girl I once knew. Of course, I finally agreed, but try not to damage the furniture. Don't worry, Maeve, Leland laughed. We'll treat your things as if they were our own. Dinner was over and I started to clear the plates, but no one offered to help. Instead, Harrison turned on the TV. Willow started rearranging the spices in my cupboard, in a more logical order. Bryn disappeared into her room, and Tamsin and Leland went upstairs, discussing something animatedly. As I washed the dishes, I looked out the window at my garden, illuminated by the moonlight. In one day, my life had changed completely. My home, my fortress, my refuge, everything was taken over without a single shot being fired. Do you need any help? I suddenly heard Willow's voice behind me. No thanks, I'm almost done, I replied. Then I'll be going. By the way, I plan to make breakfast for everyone tomorrow morning. Where do you keep the pancake flour? In the top cupboard on the right, I answered automatically. Oh, and one more thing, she added, turning around. The guest house is a little chilly. Do you mind if we change the thermostat setting for the whole house? I pursed my lips, trying not to show my irritation. Of course, I said, even though I was screaming inside. Willow smiled and walked out, leaving me alone with the wet plates and the feeling that I had just lost something important. When the last plate was wiped and put back, I slowly climbed the stairs to the blue room that was now mine. Small without its own bathroom, it seemed even smaller after the spacious bedroom I was used to. Laughter came from Tamsin and Leland's room. From the first floor, the sound of the TV, which Harrison had turned up to full volume. From Bryn's room, the bass line of a song. I sat down on the bed and for the first time in years felt like a stranger in my own home. An unfamiliar pillow, unfamiliar sounds, an unfamiliar role, the role of a guest, not a hostess. Something told me that a few weeks could be much longer than I expected. 3 weeks, Only 21 days, but it seemed like an eternity. I stood under the cold shower in the guest bathroom, listening to the noise coming from the first floor. Even at 6 in the morning, my house was already bustling with life. But it was someone else's life, in which I was relegated to the role of an extra. During these 3 weeks, the Pharaoh family did not just move into my house, they colonized it, established their own rules and rituals. They hardly ever mentioned the renovation of their house. When I cautiously asked Tamsin about the progress of the work, she would brush off vague phrases about complicated technical issues and delays with materials. I wiped the foggy mirror and looked at my reflection. Tired eyes, new wrinkles around my mouth I had aged over the weeks. Even my graying hair seemed duller, as if the life force was leaking out of me in drops, like water from a faulty faucet. The first week was just foreplay. Tamsin and Leland had taken over my east wing, but I hoped it was temporary. The next day, when I tried to go into my office to get my work papers, the door was locked. Leland is working on an important project, Tamsin explained, intercepting me in the hallway. What do you need from there? I can get it for you. It's my office, I reminded her, trying to sound calm. And my personal documents, my computer, my things are there. Tamsin rolled her eyes, a gesture I had seen countless times in these 3 weeks. Mom, don't be so dramatic. We're not here forever. Tell me what you need and I'll get it for you. I named the folder with the documents, and she brought it, 2 hours later, after several reminders. The next day, I found my personal belongings from my bedroom had been neatly folded into boxes and moved to the blue room. We just wanted to make room for you in the closets, Willow explained with feigned concern when I found I couldn't find my favorite shoes. Tamsin said you wouldn't mind. This pattern repeated itself over and over again. First they asked for permission, then they acted without it, and then they just informed me of changes after the fact. Every day my territory was shrinking and theirs was expanding. I quickly dressed and went down to the kitchen, ready for a new day of fighting for space. But what I saw made me stop in the doorway in disbelief. My kitchen, designed personally for me by Fayetteville's best designer, had turned into a chaotic construction site. In the middle of it stood Willow, surrounded by open boxes of new appliances. Good morning, Maeve, she greeted me happily, as if not noticing my shock. I've decided that your kitchen needs an update. I walked in slowly, trying to process what I was seeing. My antique copper pots, collected over the years of traveling with Brendan, had disappeared from the open shelves. Instead, there were shiny new items with the logo of an expensive brand. Where are my things? I asked, feeling my heart start to beat faster. Oh, those old pans? Willow answered casually. They were so old and scratched. I put them in the garage, thinking maybe you'd like to give them to charity. I clenched my hands into fists, trying to control my anger. These aren't just old pots and pans, Willow. These are family heirlooms that my husband and I have collected over the years. Willow shrugged her shoulders as if she didn't understand what the problem was. But look at these new ones! She held up a shiny pan. Leland bought them especially for you. It's a professional series, the same kind they use in the best restaurants. I didn't ask for new pans, I said, enunciating each word clearly. And I didn't give you permission to change my kitchen. We just wanted to make you feel good. Willow's voice grew colder. Besides, it's not just you who needs this kitchen now. It's all of us. And to be honest, your kitchen design was a little dated. I glanced around the trashed kitchen. There were pieces of packaging on the floor, instructions for new appliances on the table, and a large garbage bag by the back door with the handles of my favorite kitchen knives, a gift from Brendan on our 30th anniversary, peeking out. You threw away my knives? I couldn't believe my eyes. They were so dull, Willow defended herself. And the handles were loose. Don't worry, Leland bought a whole set of new ones, made of German steel. I silently walked over to the bag and began to pull out my things. Knives with wooden handles, a handheld coffee grinder, and exquisitely carved wooden spoons that Brendan had brought me from his trip to Scandinavia. Each thing was not just an object. It was a part of my life, a tangible memory of happy moments. What are you doing? Willow asked, watching me with irritation. You're not going to keep this garbage, are you? It's not garbage, I answered without looking up. I put the salvaged treasures in a box and set it in the corner of the kitchen. Willow sighed defiantly but said nothing. I made myself a coffee in a new, unfamiliar coffee maker that made strange noises and had too many buttons, and hurried to work. The office was the only place where I still felt like I was in control of my destiny. When I got home from work that evening, I was greeted by an angry Harrison standing in the middle of the living room, phone in hand. Finally, he barked. I'm trying to have an important conference call and your Wi-Fi system keeps crashing. This is unacceptable. I tiredly took off my coat, trying to figure out what was going on. My spacious living room had turned into a makeshift office. On my antique desk was a huge monitor surrounded by a pile of papers and cables. The sofa was pushed to the wall, and an office desk and chair appeared in its place. What's going on here? I asked, surveying the transformation of my living space. I'm working, Harrison replied shortly. Or trying to work with this terrible internet connection. You need to call a technician and upgrade the system. This is my living room, I reminded him. And I don't remember authorizing the installation of all this equipment. Harrison looked at me with an expression that adults usually reserve for naughty children. Tamsin said you wouldn't mind if I used this space to work. The guest house is too small and the lighting is poor. Besides, he lowered his voice as if he was doing me a favor. I hardly see you during the day. You are at work, I work here. And in the evening? I asked. When I come home and want to relax in my own living room? Oh, I usually work late, he said. But if you need to watch TV, you can do it in Bryn's room. She's in the garden all the time anyway. The mention of the garden made me shudder. I hadn't seen what had happened to my garden yet, but judging by everything that was happening in the house, the news could only be bad. Listen, Harrison said in a tone that didn't allow for argument. I need to get off this conference call. My client is waiting. Can we talk about this later? And please try to keep the noise down. Sound echoes in here. He turned away, completely focused on his monitor, and I was left standing in the middle of my own home, feeling like an intruder. With a sigh, I headed to the back door to look at the garden. What I saw made me freeze in my tracks. My beautiful garden, my personal oasis that I had worked on for years, had turned into a chaotic artistic space. Scrap metal sculptures stood where my favorite roses used to grow. The canvases laid out on the ground were splashed with bright colors that seemed to have gotten on my natural stone paths. And in the middle of it all stood Bryn, her hair no longer blue but green, waving what looked like a blowtorch. Bryn, I called out, approaching quickly. What are you doing? She lifted her face mask and smiled at me like we were old friends. Oh, hi, Maeve. I'm working on a new installation. It's called Industrial Nature. Isn't it cool? You destroyed my roses, I said, pointing to where the rose garden used to be. And what happened to the Japanese maple? And my lavender beds? I moved some things to make room for my projects, Bryn replied with a shrug. Don't worry, I didn't throw your plants away. They're over there somewhere. She waved her hand in the direction of the compost pile. I slowly walked over to where she pointed and saw my precious plants, carelessly thrown away, with their bare roots drying up in the sun. The roses I had grown for years, rare varieties brought from different parts of the country, were now nothing but garden waste. You had no right, my voice trembled. This is my garden. It was yours, Bryn corrected me with the carelessness of youth. Now it's our common space, and I use it for art. You should be happy that your garden serves such a noble purpose. A noble purpose? I couldn't believe my ears. You've destroyed years of work. Don't be so dramatic. Bryn rolled her eyes, just like her cousin Tamsin. They're just plants. They'll grow back. I felt tears coming to my eyes and quickly turned away. I wouldn't give them the pleasure of seeing me cry. I quickly walked back into the house, past Harrison, who was yelling into his phone about unacceptable contract terms, and up the stairs to the second floor. I had to talk to Tamsin. She is my daughter, after all. Despite all our differences, she must realize that something is wrong. I knocked on the door of my former bedroom, now occupied by her and Leland. Tamsin? I called when no one answered. We need to talk. The door opened and Tamsin appeared, wrapped in my favorite silk robe. What is it, Mom? I was just taking a bath. I took a deep breath, trying to collect my thoughts. We need to talk about the situation. About your mother-in-law remodeling my kitchen and throwing away my things. About your father-in-law, who turned my living room into an office and forbids me to speak in my own home. And about Bryn, who destroyed my garden. Tamsin sighed and walked out of the room, closing the door behind her. Mom, you're exaggerating as usual. They're just trying to make your house more modern. And Willow's a really good cook. You should be grateful she's cooking for all of us. Cooking with my food, in my kitchen, throwing away my stuff, I clarified. But you agreed, Tamsin exclaimed with irritation. What do you want me to do? Kick your family out? They're not your family, I said quietly. Tamsin looked at me as if I had said something absurd. Leland is my husband, Mom. His family is my family. And you could be more hospitable. After all, you have such a big house for one person. Isn't it nicer when it's full of life? Life? I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. I can't use my own kitchen. I can't relax in my own living room. I can't enjoy my own garden. I sleep in the guest room and sneak around my own house, afraid to make a sound. Tamsin took a step toward me and put her hand on my shoulder in a faux soothing gesture. Mom, maybe you should see this as an opportunity to overcome your tendency to be lonely. Since Dad's death, you've been too withdrawn. It's not healthy. I dropped her hand from my shoulder, feeling anger rise inside me. Don't you dare use your father in this conversation. And don't try to make me out to be psychologically unstable just because I want to control my own house. No one is saying you're unstable. Tamsin held up her hands in a defensive gesture. But you've always been too attached to things. It's just stuff, Mom. They're my things in my house, I emphasized. And I want to know when your renovations are finished so you can go back to your place. Tamsin looked away, and I realized something was wrong. There were some complications. The repairman found serious problems with the foundation. How much longer? I asked, feeling my heart sink. It's hard to say, she answered evasively. Months? I couldn't believe my ears. Tamsin, this is unacceptable. I can't live like this for months. What about us? Her voice became hard. Are you suggesting we live on the streets? Leland finally got a big order that could change his career. Leland's parents are helping us financially. And Bryn, well, she's just Bryn. We're a family, Mom, and family is supposed to help each other. I felt my shoulders sink under the weight of the manipulation. All her life, Tamsin had known how to push my buttons, how to make me feel guilty for putting my own needs first. I'm just asking for a little respect, I said tiredly. That's all I want. We respect you, Mom. Tamsin smiled that smile I'd known since she was a kid, fake and calculated. We just have different ideas about how to run a home. But I'll talk to Leland and his family. I promise. I knew it was an empty promise, but I didn't have the energy to argue any further. I nodded and went to my little blue room, feeling completely exhausted. Nothing changed the next day, nor did it for the next week. Willow's kitchen, Harrison's office, Bryn's art studio, everything remained in place, gradually becoming permanent elements of my home. I tried to adjust, to create a new schedule where I could use the kitchen when Willow wasn't cooking, sit in the living room when Harrison wasn't working, and avoid the garden so I wouldn't see the destruction Bryn had wrought. But every day my territory was shrinking. Willow now cooked almost non-stop, experimenting with new recipes that required the use of all surfaces and appliances. Harrison set a work schedule that covered the entire day, including evenings when he said he had the most important conference calls. Bryn expanded her art studio onto the terrace, covering it with tarps and creating strange structures that blocked the view of my formerly beautiful garden. And Tamsin and Leland behaved as if it were their home, inviting friends over for parties, rearranging furniture, changing the thermostat and light settings to their liking. Leland even started receiving mail at my address, not only letters, but also packages with expensive equipment for his photo studio, which now occupied half of the second floor. One evening, when I came home from work later than usual because of a complicated project, I found the door to my blue room locked and voices coming from behind it. I knocked, and after a long pause, the door opened. Leland stood in front of me in a photography vest, camera in hand. "Oh, Maeve," he said with feigned surprise. "You're back early." "It's 9 o'clock in the evening," I replied dryly. "What are you doing in my room?" We're using it for a photo shoot. He stepped back and I saw that my small room had been transformed into a makeshift studio. My bed had been pushed to the wall, the bedding replaced with something with a bright pattern, and a blue background hung on the wall. A young woman in a summer outfit was sitting on a chair in the middle of the room, looking a little embarrassed. Without my permission, I tried to control my voice. Tamsin said you usually get back at 6. Leland shrugged. We were planning to finish before you got back, but the light in this room is just perfect for this concept. It's my bedroom, I emphasized each word. My only private space in this house. And we respect that. Leland smiled, that smug smile I hated so much. But this photo shoot is very important to my career. Georgina is an influential blogger. He nodded towards the young woman. Her post could bring me a lot of new clients. And where am I supposed to sleep tonight? I asked, feeling my patience running out. We're almost done, Leland assured me. Just another half hour, an hour at the most. You can wait downstairs. Harrison has already gone to bed, so the living room is free. I stood there not knowing what to say. Every cell in my body was screaming at the injustice, but I knew it was pointless to argue. They had already made up their minds, and my opinion didn't matter. An hour, I finally said. I went downstairs and sat in the living room, which, despite Harrison's absence, still looked like an office. Tamsin walked by, her phone in hand. Mom? She was surprised to see me. Why aren't you in your room? Because your husband is doing a photo shoot there, I replied, not hiding my irritation. Oh, yes, she nodded as if it were a normal thing. It's important for his portfolio. Doesn't it matter where I sleep? I asked. Don't be so dramatic, Mom, Tamsin sighed. You can sit here and read a book. I felt my eyes fill with tears and quickly turned away. Tamsin, I said quietly, do you realize what's going on? You're all acting like this is your home and I'm just an unwanted guest. It's temporary, Mom. Her voice softened, but still had a hint of irritation in it. And it's the only way we can do this now. Leland is finally getting recognized. His parents are helping us financially. We are trying to build our future. Can't you be a little more understanding? Understanding should be mutual, I replied. And I don't feel any respect from you, neither for me nor for my space. Tamsin rolled her eyes and I realized it was hopeless. My daughter had made her choice and it wasn't me. I have to go, she said, pointing to her phone. I have an important call. And she left, leaving me alone in a living room that was no longer mine, in a house that was no longer mine. I sat in the darkness, looking at the garden lights that illuminated Bryn's creation, and felt something inside me slowly break. But at the same time, I could feel something new being born, a determination I hadn't felt in a long time. This could not go on, and I wasn't going to let them push me out of my own life. The alarm clock's ringing cut through the silence at 5 in the morning. I opened my eyes, feeling the familiar fatigue that hadn't disappeared after sleep. Trying to move quietly so as not to wake anyone in the house, I quickly dressed and went down to the kitchen. Over the past month, it had become my daily ritual to wake up before dawn to prepare breakfast for 5 people, each with special requirements. Harrison would only eat poached eggs with whole wheat toast and organic avocado. Willow demanded freshly squeezed juice and a special blend of yogurt with chia seeds. Bryn, if she woke up for lunch at all, needed a vegan smoothie. Tamsin and Leland loved French toast with maple syrup and bacon, but only a certain kind of bacon that was sold in a specialty store across town. I turned on some soft music and started cooking. My hands automatically performed the usual movements while my mind wandered somewhere far away. How did I let this happen? When exactly did I turn from a mistress of the house into a servant? It happened so gradually that I hardly noticed. First, small requests, then expectations, and now demands that no one even considered necessary to discuss. As I was putting water on for coffee, Willow entered the kitchen wearing a silk robe that had once belonged to me. Good morning, Maeve, she said, surveying the preparations. I hope you haven't forgotten that Harrison is on a lactose-free diet today. No milk, I replied, holding back my irritation. And please make sure the eggs aren't overcooked. Last time the yolk was too hard. She sat down at the table, waiting for me to bring her coffee. I silently put a cup of the perfect latte in front of her, which I had learned to make over the weeks on the new coffee machine. Willow didn't even say thank you, as she was absorbed in her phone. Harrison showed up next, already dressed in a business suit, even though it was only 6:30. Maeve, are my shirts ironed? He asked instead of greeting me. Yes, they're in your closet, I replied, flipping the toast. The blue one with the diagonal stripes, he said, not looking up from his tablet. On the hanger next to the shirts. Good, he nodded and looked at me for the first time. And don't forget to be quiet today. I have an important video conference with Tokyo at 12. I'll be at work at 12, I reminded him. Oh, right. He waved his hand as if to shoo away an annoying fly. Then vacuum before you leave. Yesterday I heard some strange noise from the refrigerator during my conference. I bit my tongue, not reminding him that it was his responsibility to vacuum, since it was his talking that was making the noise, not my refrigerator. Instead, I just nodded and set a plate of perfect poached eggs in front of him. While I was finishing up the rest of the breakfast, Leland walked into the kitchen, smiling smugly as always. He was dressed in expensive sweatpants and a branded t-shirt, as if he were on the cover of a fashion magazine. Good morning, everyone, he said, hugging his mother and shaking his father's hand. Then he turned to me. Maeve, I'm expecting an important package today. Be home after 4 to receive it. I work until 6, I reminded him, trying to keep my tone calm. Leland rolled his eyes, a gesture that seemed to run in the family. Well, you'll have to come back early. This package is extremely important, and I can't risk it being left at the door. I can't just leave work, I protested. I have a meeting with an important client. And I have a meeting with the future of my career, Leland countered, his tone icy. But if it's so hard for you to help your family, of course I'll try to arrange something. I gave in, feeling the eyes of everyone in the room on me. Good, Leland smiled his fake smile. And don't forget to pick up my black jeans from the dry cleaners. The receipt is on the fridge. Okay, I said quietly, feeling myself blush with humiliation. One more thing, he added, already coming out of the kitchen with a cup of coffee in his hand. We're having guests over tonight. Nothing special, just a few colleagues and clients, about 15 people. Tamsin will make a list of dishes to prepare. I froze, spatula in hand. 15 people? Leland looked at me with a challenge. I won't have time to cook for that many people after work, I tried to explain, especially if I come back early for your package. Leland laughed, but his laugh was not amused. Oh, Maeve, you are so funny. Of course you won't be cooking everything yourself. Willow will help with the main course. All you have to do is serve the appetizers and, of course, wait on the guests. Wait on the guests? I couldn't believe my ears. Well, yes. He looked at me like I was a clueless child. You don't expect me to do that, do you? He laughed, and Willow and Harrison joined in as if it was the best joke they'd ever heard. I felt something snap inside of me, but instead of exploding, I nodded quietly and turned back to the stove. My reckoning would come, but not now. Now I had to play the role that was imposed on me. It turned out that a few colleagues and clients actually meant the nearly 30 people who filled my house that evening. I barely had time to get back from work, pick up a package for Leland, a huge box with some photography equipment, and my jeans from the dry cleaners, as I had to get ready for the party. Willow bossed the kitchen as if it were her own restaurant, giving orders and criticizing my every move. Bryn had decorated the house with her questionable artwork, and Harrison had temporarily cleaned out his office, but kept reminding me to be careful with his equipment. Don't touch that monitor, Maeve. It costs more than you make in a month, he warned as he watched me dusting his workstation. Tamsin didn't help at all, busy picking out clothes and makeup for a big night. When I knocked on her door, asking about the list of dishes she was supposed to prepare, she just waved her hand in frustration. Mom, I'm busy right now. Just do what you normally do at these events, I reminded her. Then talk to Willow. She'll know what to do, she said, turning back to the mirror. At 7 in the evening, the first guests were already ringing the doorbell. I opened the door, automatically putting on the smile I had learned to wear like a mask. Welcome, I said to a couple in evening wear, who were clearly surprised to be greeted by an older woman. Oh, thank you. The man nodded awkwardly. We're here to see Leland Farrow. Of course, come in, I stepped aside, letting them in. May I take your coats? While I was hanging their clothes, Leland appeared, shining in a new designer suit. Jeffrey, Amanda, good to see you. He hugged them like old friends. Then he turned to me. Maeve, would you please bring some champagne for our first guests? I nodded and went to the kitchen, feeling the guests' curious gazes on me. Who is this woman? A relative? A housewife? Over the next hour, the house filled with people photographers, magazine editors, people from the advertising industry. Leland was the center of attention, talking and laughing animatedly, introducing himself as a successful artist photographer with a studio in a prestigious area of the city. I served drinks and appetizers, wiped up spills, and took away empty plates. No one asked who I was, and Leland didn't feel the need to introduce me. Only once, when one of the guests asked about this beautiful house, Leland casually threw in, "Oh, it's my mother-in-law's house. She has graciously allowed us to stay here while we renovate our own villa." Remodeling your villa? They had a one-room apartment in an old house on the outskirts of town. I could hardly contain my bitter laughter. The evening culminated when Leland raised his glass to toast, attracting the attention of everyone present. Friends, colleagues, distinguished guests, he said in a voice that easily overrode the din of conversation. Thank you for coming today to share with me the joy of starting a new phase of my career. As you know, my work was awarded the Contemporary Photography Magazine Prize, and now I am preparing for a solo exhibition at the Impulse Gallery. Applause filled the room. I stood in the corner with a tray in my hands, feeling completely invisible. And a special thank you to my beautiful wife Tamsin, Leland continued, hugging my daughter who beamed with pride. Without her support, none of this would have happened. More applause, smiles, admiring glances. Tamsin looked like the perfect couple from a glossy magazine next to Leland. Young, successful, happy. And also, Leland added after a short pause, thanks to our irreplaceable Maeve for helping to organize the evening. He waved in my direction, and several people turned around, nodding with polite smiles, obviously thinking I was a hired housekeeper. Maeve, Leland called out, I think we're running out of champagne. Could you please bring in a few more bottles of ice? I nodded silently and went to the kitchen, feeling my cheeks burn with humiliation. Indispensable Maeve. As if I was part of the service staff, not the owner of the house they were all standing in. The party went on until late at night. When the last guest finally left, it was approaching 2 o'clock. Tamsin and Leland, still full of energy and enthusiasm, went upstairs, leaving me to clean up the mess in the living room and kitchen. Good night, Maeve, Leland said over his shoulder. The evening was great, thanks for your help. And don't forget to take care of those stains on the couch tomorrow. Someone spilled red wine. I stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by dirty plates, empty bottles, and leftovers. Fatigue enveloped me like a heavy blanket, but I knew I couldn't sleep leaving this mess. Slowly, methodically, I began to clean up, sorting the garbage and collecting the dishes. In one of the corners, behind a chair, I noticed someone's forgotten bag, a small leather briefcase. Opening it to find the owner's identification, I saw a stack of papers. On top was a document with the logo of Fayetteville Trust Bank and Leland's name on it. At first, I wanted to just close the bag and put it away for return. But something, perhaps irritation from the evening or just instinct, made me look at the document more closely. It was an application for a $500,000 business loan for Faro Photography LLC. The business address was listed as mine, not as a temporary address, but as the company's permanent address. With growing excitement, I looked through the other papers in the bag. Among them was a report from the Johnson & Sons Construction Company on the inspection of Tamsin and Leland's house. But instead of describing the water damage, it clearly stated, no structural problems or damage to the plumbing system was found. The house is in good condition, requiring only cosmetic repairs. The report was dated 3 weeks ago, the day before Tamsin called me with the story of the broken water pipe. My hands shook as I continued to look through the documents. There were invoices for new photographic equipment ordered in my name, a contract to rent a studio space in the city center, also with my address, and several letters from collection agencies addressed to Leland about outstanding debts. Suddenly, everything became clear. There were no repairs. There had been no accident with the water supply. It was a carefully planned scheme to use my address and my house to grow Leland's business and obtain loans that, judging by the letters from the debt collectors, he was unlikely to repay. I carefully put the documents back into my bag, trying to keep them in their original order. Then I went to the window and took a deep breath, trying to collect my thoughts. This wasn't just an invasion of my life. It was a fraud that could have serious legal consequences for me. I had to act, but carefully. If Leland used my address to obtain loans that he obviously had no plans to repay, it could lead to problems with my own credit score, possibly even the loss of my home. That night, I hardly slept at all. Early in the morning, when everyone was still sleeping after the party, I quietly slipped out of the house and headed to the office of Nathan Goldberg, the lawyer who had helped me with legal matters after Brendan's death. He was not just a lawyer, but a friend I trusted. Nathan met me in his office with a cup of coffee and a concerned look on his face. "Maeve, what's wrong?" he asked as I sat down across from him. "You look exhausted." I told him everything about Pharaoh's intrusion into my life, the gradual pushing of me out of my own home, yesterday's discovery. "I found documents that prove they lied about the renovations," I finished, "and that Leland is using my address to get loans and register his business. I don't even know how deeply he's dragged me into his financial fraud." Nathan listened intently, taking notes and asking clarifying questions from time to time. When I was done, he leaned back in his chair with a serious expression on his face. "This is serious, Maeve," he said. "Using your address without permission to take out loans could be classified as fraud, especially if he doesn't plan to pay them back, which, judging by the collection letters, is quite possible." "What should I do?" I asked, feeling both scared and relieved to finally share my burden. "First, we need proof," Nathan replied. "The documents you found are a start, but we need more. We need to contact the bank, find out what other loans were taken out on your behalf, check to see if your personal information was used. And then? Then we serve a formal eviction notice," Nathan said firmly. "They have no legal right to be in your house, especially under the circumstances. If they refuse to leave, we'll go to court and possibly even the police if we find evidence of fraud." I nodded, feeling the determination return to me. For the first time in a long time, I could see a way forward. "But be careful," Nathan warned. "Don't show that you know anything until we're ready to act. Gather evidence, make copies of documents, record conversations if possible. We need to be prepared when we make our move." "How long will it take?" I asked. "It depends on how much evidence we can gather and how quickly. But I'd say at least a week, maybe two," Nathan replied. In the meantime, I'm still playing the role of the dutiful hostess," I finished for him. "Unfortunately, yes," he agreed. "But don't worry, Maeve. We're going to get your house and your life back." When I left Nathan's office, the sun was already high. I had to rush to work, but for the first time in a long time, I felt strong instead of broken. The plan was ready, and I was ready to fight. This family burst into my life, turned it upside down, and made me question my own worth. But I was no longer a victim. I was Maeve Halloran, and I was going to get my home and my dignity back. Now all I had to do was wait, gather the necessary evidence, and prepare for the decisive moment when the masks would fall and the truth would come out. For the next 2 weeks, I played the most difficult role of my life. On the outside, I was a submissive, dutiful housewife who had come to terms with the new order of things. On the inside, I was a detective collecting evidence against the people who had taken over her home. Every morning I made breakfast, smiling and nodding in response to new demands. In the evening, I cleaned, did laundry, and ran errands. But I used every moment alone to collect information. I found a whole folder of bank statements hidden in the bottom drawer of Leland's desk. Loans, credit card applications, business loans. Everything was issued using my address. I took photos of the documents with my phone, carefully putting everything back in its place. One day, while cleaning Tamsin's room, I found her diary. I had never read my daughter's personal notes before, but this time my moral principles gave way to my instinct for self-preservation. There I found an entry dated the day they moved in. "Mom has no idea that we are planning to stay for a long time. Leland says it's the best decision for our financial situation. After all, Why pay rent when mom has such a huge house? One evening, I overheard Leland talking to his father. The old lady doesn't even realize that we're not going anywhere, Leland laughed. In a few months, we can hint that she should move to a retirement home. Imagine how much money we'll save. Each new discovery strengthened my resolve. I passed all the evidence to Nathan, who gradually built our case. We're almost there, he told me during our last meeting. We just need to find the right moment. That moment came unexpectedly. At dinner on Tuesday, Leland suddenly announced, Maeve, we have some very special guests coming over on Friday. We need to organize a fancy dinner. Who's coming? I asked, trying to hide my anxiety. Representatives of the Fayetteville Trust. He couldn't help but smile smugly. The same ones who are reviewing my business loan application. If all goes well, I'll get $500,000 to expand my studio. I almost choked on my drink. $500,000? A loan that he would get using my address, my house as collateral? Of course, I'll get everything ready, I answered with feigned submission. How many people are coming? 5. The bank director, 2 loan managers, and a couple of other important people. Make it something special, Maeve. Our future depends on it. Ours. He said ours when he meant only himself and maybe Tamsin. I nodded and hurried to my room where I immediately called Nathan. This is our chance, the lawyer said after listening to me. It's the perfect moment for a confrontation, especially with the bankers as witnesses. I will prepare all the documents by Friday, and you make sure the police officers are there when you need them. For 3 days, I prepared for the dinner as if it were the most important event in my life. And in a way, it was. I ordered the best ingredients, prepared an exquisite 5-course menu, and bought expensive wines. Leland was pleased with my enthusiasm, believing that I had finally come to terms with my role. You see, Tamsin? I heard him say smugly. I told you she would get used to it. Your mother has finally realized her place. On Friday, I woke up early and spent the day in the kitchen. The Farrow family took my efforts for granted, stopping by from time to check on progress and add new demands. Make sure the souffle is perfect, Willow would order, as if I were an inexperienced assistant, not the mistress of the house. Don't forget to polish the silver, Harrison added, and use the crystal glasses from the sideboard. I hope you don't go overboard with the spices like last time, Tamsin sighed, not even offering to help. I smiled and nodded, knowing that this was the last night they would speak to me in that tone. At 7 in the evening, the guests arrived. Leland greeted them at the door, dressed in an elegant suit, acting like the true owner of the house. Tamsin stood next to him, shining in her evening gown. Leland's parents were playing the roles of the dignified in-laws. Even Bryn looked decent, with minimal piercings. And I, dressed in a simple black dress, served them, serving drinks, appetizers, and main courses. The bankers seemed to consider me part of the staff, not even realizing that I was the owner of the elegant house that Leland presented as his family residence. The conversation at the table revolved around Leland's business plan, his recent successes, and growth prospects. He spoke confidently, sprinkling in numbers and forecasts, painting a picture of the rapid rise of his photography empire. The bankers listened with polite interest, occasionally asking clarifying questions. And this address has been your permanent residence for how many years? The bank director asked, looking through the documents. Oh, we've been living here for quite a while, Leland replied evasively. It's our family home, isn't it, dear? He smiled at Tamsin, who nodded with calculated enthusiasm. I gritted my teeth as I continued to serve the plates of the main course, a rack of lamb with rosemary sauce. Soon, I reminded myself. Soon. When the plates were empty and the conversation turned to coffee and dessert, my moment came. I disappeared into the kitchen, where not only the chocolate cake was waiting for me, but also Nathan with a stack of documents. Are you ready? He asked quietly. I took a deep breath and nodded. More than ready. Nathan stayed in the kitchen, and I returned to the dining room with a large silver tray covered with a lid. Leland was just telling a joke, and everyone was laughing when I put the tray on the table. Ah, dessert, he smiled. I hope it's that wonderful chocolate cake, Maeve. Not quite, I replied, removing the lid. Instead of the cake, there was a stack of documents on the tray, copies of bank statements, loan applications, fake documents about the renovation of Leland's house, and on top of that, an official eviction notice. The room fell silent. Leland stared at the documents, then at me, his face gradually turning red. "What is this?" he hissed. "This, Leland, is proof of your fraud," I replied calmly. "Proof that you lied about the renovations, used my address to get loans, and planned to actually steal my house." I turned to the bankers, who looked at me with shock and confusion. "Gentlemen, I am Maeve Halloran, the real owner of this house. Leland Farrow and his family moved here 2 months ago under the pretext of temporary residence due to alleged renovations in their apartment. In reality, they plan to stay forever, gradually pushing me out of my own home." "Mom, what are you doing?" exclaimed Tamsin, jumping up from her seat. "What I should have done a long time ago, daughter," I replied. "I'm taking back my house and my dignity." At that moment, Nathan entered the room holding additional copies of the documents. "Good evening, gentlemen," he said to the bankers. "Nathan Goldberg, Ms. Halloran's lawyer. Here you will find evidence that Mr. Farrow tried to fraudulently obtain a loan by using this house as collateral without the permission of the real owner." The bank director took the documents and quickly looked through them, his face growing more grim with each page. "These are serious charges, Mr. Farrow," he said at last. "Very serious." Leland finally recovered from his shock and tried to regain control of the situation. "This is some kind of misunderstanding," he laughed nervously. "Maeve just doesn't understand the business side of things. We're family, we live together, we use the same address." "We are not family," I interrupted him. "And this is not your home. You have exactly 24 hours to pack your things and leave. All of you." "You can't just throw us out!" screamed Willow, her face contorted with anger. "We have rights!" "Actually, you don't," Nathan interjected. "You have no legal rights to live here. You are not tenants, owners, or registered residents. You are guests who are no longer welcome." "What if we refuse to leave?" Harrison asked defiantly. In response, I pulled out my phone and dialed the number. "Officer Johnson?" "Yes, they're still here. You can come in." The door opened and 2 police officers entered the dining room. I had met them earlier through Nathan, explaining the situation and asking for their support. "Officers, what's going on?" asked the bank director, who was puzzled. "We've received a complaint about possible fraud and trespassing," one of the officers explained, "and apparently an attempt to obtain a loan by fraud." The atmosphere around the table changed instantly. The bankers who had just smiled at Leland now looked at him with suspicion and contempt. Leland tried to justify himself, but his arguments were becoming more and more ridiculous. "Tamsin, tell them," he exclaimed, turning to my daughter. "Tell them that your mother has agreed that we have the right to live here." But even Tamsin, shocked by the turn of events, could not save the situation. "Did you know?" I asked her quietly. "Did you know about his plans to use my address for loans?" She looked away, and that was enough of an answer. "Pack your things," I said, feeling not triumphant but deeply tired. "All of you. Tomorrow at this time, I want you out of here." Under the watch of the police and the embarrassed bankers, the Farrow family finally left the dining room. I could hear them arguing upstairs, blaming each other for the failure of the plan. The bankers apologized, assuring me that the loan would certainly not be approved, and hurried away. Nathan stayed with me for a while longer, helping me develop a plan in case the Farrows tried to return. "You did well, Maeve," he said as he said goodbye. "Not many people would have found the strength to face a situation like that." That night I slept in my bedroom for the first time in weeks. It seemed foreign, filled with Tamsin and Leland's things, but it was the beginning of recovery. The next day they left, not without more drama, accusations, and threats, but under the watchful eye of the police, who returned to ensure a peaceful eviction. Tamsin was the last to leave, pausing at the door with an expression I couldn't decipher, a mixture of anger, shame, and perhaps the slightest bit of understanding. "You ruined our lives," she said quietly. "No, Tamsin, I saved mine." 3 months passed. I rebuilt my home, replacing the furniture they had damaged, repainting the walls that Bryn had decorated with her drawings. The kitchen had to be almost completely redone after Willow's innovations. The garden needed the most work, Many plants did not survive the neglect, but spring brought new life, and I gradually revived my green paradise. Tamsin called me only once, a month after I moved out. She and Leland had broken up. His business had collapsed after the banks withdrew all credit lines due to an attempted fraud. She asked me if she could come back, just for a while until she gets back on her feet. I said no, politely but firmly. I offered to help her find an apartment, even lend her money for a down payment, but not to live together. Never again. You are still my daughter, I told her, and I will always love you. But there will be clear boundaries between us now. She agreed, perhaps realizing for the first time in her life that her manipulations no longer worked. Now we meet once a month for lunch in the city. We talk about superficial things, avoiding deep topics. Maybe one day we can rebuild a real relationship. But I will no longer allow her or anyone else to use me. Tonight, I sit on the terrace of my house, watching the sunset through the branches of the maple tree, the same one under which Brendan once proposed to me. The house is quiet, but this silence no longer oppresses me. It is the silence of freedom, the silence of peace. I raise a glass of wine, silently welcoming a new life. My life on my terms, and this is the sweetest victory of all.